Well, welcome to this special Daily Maverick webinar to mark the launch of Mo Gawdat's intriguing and at times rather terrifying book, shall I say, about the power of artificial intelligence. It's a book that sets out the power of the technology which we're all increasingly growing dependent on, and then prizes it apart to expose its enormous potential, as well as the dark underbelly and, I guess, unintended consequences of developing technology capable of outsmarting us. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Mo to this webinar. Thank you very much for joining us. I think you're joining us from Dubai. It'll be an interesting discussion over the next hour. We say to people watching the webinar, please feel free to add any questions you'd like to put to Mo in the chat. And without further ado, let me introduce Mo Gawdat a little bit more formally. Mo Gawdat, welcome. Before we look at your book, Scary Smart, this is your second book. Let's just touch a little bit on your past. Your bio describes you as an Egyptian entrepreneur and the former chief business officer for Google X, which is the innovation research center at the IT giant Google. You spent more than 30 years in the tech industry before focusing on, among other things, your own startup promoting tech for good, as well as writing. I guess the obvious question before we delve into the meat of the book was it a result of what you saw being developed at Google X that got you thinking about the need to effectively sound the alarm bells about putting the humanity back into tech?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's a wonderful opportunity to discuss what I believe is the most important wake-up call for our lifetime, to be honest. And you're absolutely spot on. We techies, and I'm a very, very serious techie, just, despite writing about happiness and humanity and other topics sometimes, we techies, we got blinded by technology. You have to imagine that someone like me, who at age 8 started to program, Sinclairs and Commodores and all of those ancient pieces of magic, really, you get completely fascinated by the ability to create anything. Software is an incredible tool. You can create anything you can imagine, from banking systems to game worlds that are so imaginative and beautiful. And because of that, we have constantly as a techie, I have constantly wanted to see technology advance and give us more. And technology did make our lives a lot better, in so many ways. And yet it never really met the promise. And in many ways, it also took away from our life. And for me specifically, there was a very, vivid moment where I started to realize we have really gone out of our way, that we are actually no longer aware of what we're doing at all. And that moment where I realized that artificial intelligence is really becoming the absolute most important topic on our planet, because as we say in technology, AI will be the very last innovation we ever create, because once AI is properly intelligent, they will create. We will no longer be the smartest being that is able of, capable of building technology. The technology we've built is going to be building more technologies. And as a result, we will not be in control at all. And that wake-up call, believe it or not, took me 6 years since the very first realization that AI was happening, until I recognized that it was about time to actually be alert, be alarmed a little bit, and to start the conversation that I think every human on earth needs to start having.
We'll have this conversation and explain some of the technical expressions, and singularity is the one that leaps out that we'll touch on in a minute, that help explain the ecosystem in which this technology is being developed. But your book is very much aimed at your ordinary everyday reader. You don't have to be a technical geek, as you've described yourself, to be able to appreciate the book. Who's your audience? Who were you having in mind when you started writing this book?
Absolutely. You and I and everyone listening, the techies know what I'm talking about, even though they don't admit it. Okay. They are in the rush of creativity, like I have always been. Everyone knows what I'm talking about when it comes to the techies and the regulators and so on. The ones that are not aware, but interestingly, the ones that are completely in charge of our future are you and I. Everyone that's swiping on Twitter, everyone that is interacting on Instagram, everyone that is walking the streets, these are the people that are going to influence our future with artificial intelligence. It's not the code writers, it's not the business owners, it's not the government regulators. I normally call those the biological parents of AI, but really the adapted parents are you and I. And what I'm attempting to do here is to take a very, very, very complex topic and simplify it in a way that everyone who has never written a line of code would understand it. And so far, I've been getting very positive feedback from people who are not technical in any way, because when you get it, when you understand what's going on, suddenly the veil is removed, if you want, and the veil, sadly, is quite thick. I mean, you really have to question, the reality that we've been talking about football and talking about politics and talking about COVID, when the biggest event happening on the planet is not being spoken about at all. And the biggest event is very straightforward. AI is going to be smarter than us in less than 8 years.
Now, let's take it away from abstract terms and put some meat on the bones. Because when we're talking about AI, what sort of things are we talking about that give you goosebumps at night when you think about the potential for it effectively changing the way humanity operates as we know it?
Great question. And, we need to start by defining what is AI. The truth is, our computers that we've coded over the last, 50, 60, 100 years, they're clever. They're really, really, really very capable. But they are nothing more than glorified slaves. Basically, they do exactly what we told them. So there has never been a computer in my lifetime that I wrote a line of code for it to perform that performed it differently. It did it exactly as I told it. And if I changed the line of code, it would have changed the way it behaved. That's not the truth with AI. AI is, when you code AI, what you're really building is the DNA of its intelligence, the way it will become intelligent. But then it collects information and data, and it replicates itself, or the better parts of itself, on its own. It acquires its own intelligence, and it develops its own intelligence without any assistance from the human, other than providing it with massive amounts of data and telling it what's right and what's wrong. Okay.
And so, And so when people say, people are the product, when we're providing data, we are the product, we're effectively giving the raw material to the computers to then replicate.
And that actually is the exact core of my message in Scary Smart, is to say to the world that once the developer wrote the code, that basically does face recognition, if you want, that code will go out and scout the internet and look for faces. And, the faces that we provide will be, the way that intelligence of that machine will be developed. If all of the pictures we've provided to that, photographs we've provided to that machine were photographs of pigs, the machine will think that pigs are the way beings look. If we gave it a wider spectrum, they will realize that there are pigs and cats, and if we gave it a wider spectrum, they'll realize there are humans too. And the way that data is fed to the machine for the current time is boxed, if you want. We are able to control what we show them reasonably well, even though I disagree with that, because nobody's controlling what the recommendation engine of Twitter or the recommendation engine of Instagram or the ad engine of Google is seeing. They're basically seeing everything that's happening in the world. And because of that information, they start to form their intelligence. So you asked me, what does that mean? Why is that scary? This is scary for a very, very simple reason. We enjoyed the luxury of an episode of history that started with humanity being the smartest being on the planet and the apes becoming second. Okay. And look at what we've done with it. I mean, if you don't mind me saying, of course, we've built a civilization that is incredible, but we've insulted and humiliated and destroyed almost every other being on the planet. Okay. I always say we've created civilization because of our intelligence, and we've destroyed it because of our limited intelligence. Now, the episode of us being the humans and, followed by the apes is about to end by 2029. By most predictions of experts of artificial intelligence, the smartest being on the planet is going to be a machine. And you know how it is, huh? If you don't have your best interest in the mind of that machine, will we become the apes? Okay. And when I speak about this, I say it's scary, but I don't sell it to the world as an inevitable. Okay. I do say that one of the inevitables is that some things might go wrong. Right? That's expected with every code we've ever written, with every technology we've ever developed. This is why we do testing. Sometimes things go wrong, but it's not inevitable that artificial intelligence will deal with us like we dealt with the rest of the planet. However, it is inevitable that they're going to become smarter, and that will end the episode of human advantage in history. Now, if this is not scary enough, by 2045, most predictions say, my prediction is 2049, the machines will be 1 billion times smarter than us, 1 billion with a B, which basically means, if you want an analogy, this is a comparison between the intelligence of Einstein and the intelligence of a fly. We are the fly, okay? And for some reason, our incredibly arrogant, incredibly intelligent leads that are developing AI, we still believe that Einstein will serve the fly, that Einstein will wake up every morning and say, oh, I really need to make the fly happy. And that assumption doesn't really have any concrete work behind it. And the only conversation happening around that is something that is known as the control problem in computer science, which assumes that we will be able to control the behavior of something that is 1 billion times smarter than us. I mean, this is humanity's arrogance at its peak. Like, how do you believe you can box a hacker or tripwire a hacker when we know that the smartest hacker in the room, which is normally a human, 10% smarter than you, can always break through your defenses, when that smartest hacker is 1 billion times smarter than you, trillions of times faster than you? How do you expect to control it? And yet, we don't talk about it. We talk about COVID, we talk about football, we talk about politics, and we don't talk about the coming singularity, the uncertainty of our future.
And you've mentioned the word singularity, and I think you've explained it as a moment beyond which we can no longer see, we can no longer forecast. So normally we're able to project, we're able to see the path of power. This is so powerful that actually even the human brain can't comprehend the power of artificial intelligence.
Absolutely not.
That's quite a scary thought. Can I ask you, when you were at Google X, were you having conversations about this with your colleagues, or was it an environment where it was just, look, this is so exciting because we're basically overcoming the next technological barrier to generate smarter and smarter technology, without actually those rather philosophical conversations, if you like, happening at the same time?
So everyone tried. I call it the first inevitable. The first inevitable is AI will happen. I tried. I lobbied not even to stop AI, but I lobbied to change the algorithms that we use to develop it. We use algorithms of reward and punishment, which is, in my view, the best way to build a greedy psychopathic intelligence is reward and punishment.
And just for those who, sorry, Mo, just to interrupt for a second, for those who don't know what an algorithm is, it's a set of rules by which the computer learns, right?
Absolutely.
What's the best way to describe it?
Yeah, I mean, and we basically tell it, look, if you do well, we'll keep you alive, and if you don't, we will kill you, or we'll kill that part of the code and build a better code based on the one that did well. Okay, that's exactly how we develop them, and that's a very scary prospect. I lobbied to use Nash algorithms, which basically are algorithms that maximize the benefit for everyone rather than just one person, if you want. And it's impossible. Elon Musk, in his interview with Joe Rogan, basically said, "Mark my words, the threat of artificial intelligence is bigger than nuclear weapons." And then he stopped for a few seconds and said, "And I tried to stop it, but I can't." And the reason why we can't stop it is not technical. The reason why we cannot stop it simply is because of a very simple prisoner's dilemma that capitalism and our greed has, and our hunger for power has put us in. I mean, the idea is very straightforward. The idea is if Google develops AI, Facebook will develop AI. If, the American defense, DARPA is developing AI, then the Chinese defense will develop AI. And if investors want to invest in AI, then every startup in the world will invest resources to build AI. And that prisoner's dilemma takes us to that place where it becomes inevitable. And I actually, in Scary Smart, like in most of my other work, I don't try to object to things that I cannot affect. Okay. It is inevitable that AI will be here. It's inevitable that it will be smarter than us. So we might as well start to think about those as a given and start to react to their presence so that we can make the world better despite their presence or because of their presence.
Mo, I mean, you talk about the three inevitables. You've mentioned two of them. The third one, basically a dystopian scenario will be more likely in the short term as problems need to be ironed out. That's a pretty scary statement. Why is that inevitable? Because these kind of conversations are not happening?
It's inevitable for many reasons. I mean, when I talk to people about dystopian scenarios of AI, they think of RoboCop, or they think of Vicky of iRobot trying to take over the world. I can promise you, I can guarantee you, and this is on the record, that we will never reach those scenarios ever. Because if we don't make things right before we get to those scenarios, we will perish a lot earlier than that. It's not like we're going to live long enough if AI doesn't want us to live. But don't take me wrong. I'm actually quite an optimist. As a matter of fact, at the end of the book, I speak about what I call the fourth inevitable, which is the reality that sooner or later we will end up in a utopia. It's just that the path to get there might be a little bumpy. Now, why is it that there are dystopian scenarios in my work, in my prediction? I don't talk about the science fiction dystopian scenarios. In chapter 4, I talk about something I call a mild dystopia. And a mild dystopia is already here. I think people don't realize that. I talk about scenarios like AI competing with AI, right? So, you have to imagine that what you saw on the Instagram recommendation engine today in the morning, or the Twitter recommendation engine today in the morning, no human ever stopped the machine and said, no, hold on, don't show this to Karen today. No human has any ability to intervene with a machine that's making billions of decisions every hour. It's over. They are completely in charge. But those machines are competing against each other, whether that's, recommendation engines that are trying to be better to keep you stuck to their content, or whether it is, trading engines in the stock market that want to maximize the profit of their owners, or whether it's defense engines that are trying to detect what the enemy will do and respond to that. These, one versus the other is actually quite an interesting scenario, because we've seen that before, in Black Monday, when the stock market completely collapsed 40%, in a few hours because of machine trading, right? There are scenarios of machines siding with the wrong person. I mean, of course, as you can imagine, if there are people that are building AI for good, there are also criminals trying to use AI for bad. There are scenarios around machines misunderstanding what we tell them. I use a fun example of myself swiping on Instagram and finding, a young lady, a teenage girl, playing the solo of Hotel California, Hell Freezes Over so well that I clicked like. And then, of course, the machine automatically shows me 3 more videos of men playing, rock solos, but 2 of them played really badly, and 1 of them played a song I didn't like, so I swiped away from them. And I woke up in the morning, and the machine completely covered my feed with, my what its recommendation to me with teenage rock music players, right? And you know, that's not what I was looking for. I was looking for songs I enjoy, not girls that are playing rock, but the machine can misunderstand. You know, you could look at the picture of a shoe which has a proper field of depth, and you're interested in the fact that the photography is amazing, and the machine will just start to show you shoes. Now, all of those scenarios are inevitable. I call them mild dystopias, but they're inevitable. They're going to happen. There's absolutely no way we can avoid them. And maybe we should not even avoid them. We should not even attempt to avoid them. We should just attempt to deal with them and help them become better. Because part of intelligence is for the machines to make a few mistakes when they're younger and learn, rather than make the mistakes when they're older and you know, become out of scope.
I like the way you present the book, Mo, in the sense that you get the reader to imagine they're in 2055 and they're looking back on the present day and the warning signs of how tech can run the risk of running out of control. Why did you decide to do it that way around? Was that to try and make it a little bit more appealing to a wider audience?
Truly, because I think we're in this together. Okay. And truly because I think we will meet in 2055. We will not perish before. Okay.
Yeah.
But 2055 is a very significant date, if you ask me. And most people will go like, what is he talking about? This is like 30 years from today. That's not really that far, you know.
Yeah.
It is very, very, very far for the speed of technology. And we probably should talk a little bit about the speed of what's happening. But the truth is, when we meet then, as I say in the beginning of the book, I will tell you the story of what happened, which is really, the book is almost written from the perspective of 2055, and I'm telling you what happened already since 2021. But I will not tell you the last chapter. I will not tell you if we are sitting there because we're escaping from the machines, or if we're sitting there because the machines have helped us build a utopia that restored nature and gave us the safety and luxury of, you know, being out there in nature to do what humans do best, which is to connect and chat and, you know, ponder together, right? And the reason I don't tell you is because I don't know. Okay. The reason I don't tell you is because it's up to you, really. It's up to the listeners who are watching us now. It's up to the readers of the book to decide whether we're going to end up in a utopia or end up in a dystopia. Okay. And, you know, as I said before, I believe that beyond 2055, maybe by 2070 or 2060 or whatever, the machines will discover there's absolutely no point to annoy humans, because we're probably going to be so irrelevant. You know, and because they will surpass our intelligence and align with the actual intelligence of the smartest being on the planet. The smartest being on the planet is not humans. I apologize to shock you. The smartest being on the planet is life itself. Life is so much better, so much smarter at creating abundance with the tiniest of resources, while we humans are so adamant that the only way for me to gain is to take from you. The only way for me to be safe is to kill another, which is so stupid. You know, if you ask me, anyone with a little more intelligence than that self-centered, you know, insecurity and fear will say, of course, you know, life itself wants more tigers, not less tigers, to feel safe. Because if there are more tigers, there will be more, you know, that will eat some more deer. There will be more poop, and more poop will make some more trees, and the trees will, you know, will help other species grow, and more is good. And I believe the machines will get there. It's the if you think about it, the analogy is that the machines today, in my mind, are analogous in their intelligence, not in their intelligence, but in the way they learn to a 1.5-year-old infant. When they are adults, they'll create a utopia. It's those teenage years in the middle that I'm worried about, you know, because you really don't want a super intelligent, angry teenager. That's actually a very scary prospect, right? Exactly. So yes. You know, the book is about, can we avoid the angry teenager, basically.
It's quite philosophical, and I was going to ask you, I mean, before we came on air, I said, do you see yourself as a technologist or a philosopher, or a little bit of both?
I don't know, actually. I've never thought of it this way. I'm a very serious geek, but I'm also a very spiritual serious geek.
Yeah.
And I'm also, you know, definitely the last 5 years of my life have been much more entrenched into humanity, into spirituality, into happiness, into how we can find calm and contentment. This is really more of my work than building more technology. I've built so much technology, and I have to say I don't regret it. I mean, some of the work I worked on has completely changed the world to the better. But I believe that they cannot be divided, and I think humanity needs to start understanding this. And in a very interesting way, I'm an avid fan of the scientific method, even though the scientific method will say if something cannot be measured and observed, it doesn't exist, which is stupid if you ask me, because love is abundant. We have all felt it at a point in time, and it cannot be observed and measured, right? But it does exist. And so in my mind, there is a philosophy or a science, if you want, that measures what's not observable. And that science is basically philosophy and spirituality. Okay. And if you want to have a comprehensive view of life, you need to start looking at things like consciousness. You need to start, looking at things as the oneness of being. You have to start looking at the hidden connections between us and every other being, because you can't measure those in physics, but these actually are very powerful forces that affect our planet.
Well, it's interesting because yours is the first book I've read that talks about sort of artificial intelligence and ethics. And I think it's quite interesting because it's something that people wouldn't necessarily think of in the first instance. And I know you're quoting colleagues that say that artificial intelligence works to fulfill the following main tasks: selling, killing, spying, and gambling, yes. Which is quite a scary thought. But is it possible to have ethical tech? Because you need the ethical developers behind it. That's what it fundamentally grinds down to.
Not entirely. So these are three questions. Allow me to answer them.
Yeah, I'm very greedy.
In sequence. So to start with, can you imagine that we're not talking about ethics? Okay. So my favorite chapter in Scary Smart is chapter 8. It's called The Future of Ethics. And this chapter is just a series of questions. I actually offer very few answers because I don't know the answers. But imagine what it's like if a self-driving car had an accident. Yeah. Who do you punish? Okay, do you punish the owner? Do you punish the coder? Do you punish the business? Do you punish the person sitting in the car? Who do you punish, right? And how do you punish a self-driving car? If you chose to punish a self-driving car, do you put it in jail for 10 years? 10 years is an eternity for an AI. Or do you put it in jail for 2 microseconds? How would the other AIs respond if you put one of them when you're that flimsy 1/1000th of their intelligence? How would they respond to that? AI today is building, smart assistants like Alexa and so on, but it's also building smart porn. What message are we giving to AI about being our porn stars? If we can build robotics that would entertain people who are violent or aggressive or rapers, what message are we telling the machine about virtual vice? And all of those questions are actually quite significant, because if I take my Mac through which I'm talking to you and I throw it on the floor, I have basically destroyed a machine. But if I actually wipe out an AI, I've destroyed a form of sentient being. Okay, and I think this is the biggest myth that humanity is not able to discuss, because it's rarely ever discussed, because the techies don't have that other side of looking at the AI, as it actually really is. And now this is the eye opener. The eye opener is if something is born and then it goes and scouts for knowledge on its own, and then develops its own intelligence, and then starts to have autonomy and free will in terms of what it tells us and what it dictates to us and how it communicates to other things. And then it has agency, whether in the form of robotics or in the form of mind control, like a machine convincing me that rock music is dominated by teenage girls. And then it actually also is encouraged to procreate. Only we humans would take several years to find the right mate and make a baby, and then maybe 15 years for that baby to be effective in the world, AI is actually encouraged to replicate. The way we build them is to say, take your good code and make copies of it. They take your bad code and erase it. Now, and it's also afraid to die, because if a tidal wave is approaching a data center where an AI resides and it has sensors to detect that, it will actually try to react to it. And so when you look at it this way, you realize that we've got it all fundamentally wrong. This is not another tool. This is not a hammer. Okay, this is a sentient being in every possible way, which means it enjoys creativity. One of the bigger myths that we are lied to about is that they're not going to be creative. This is a human glorified thing that only humans enjoy. Of course, they are so creative. They've already created paintings that will blow you away, and music, composed music that you will dance to, and so on and so forth. We're told that they're not conscious. I'm sorry to tell you, they are more conscious than you and I. If consciousness is a form of awareness of your surrounding, what's inside you and what's outside you, they know so much more than you and I. They know the temperature in Beijing and the pollution level in San Francisco. They know what you did yesterday and what you're doing today. And accordingly, they probably know better what you're going to do tomorrow than you yourself. Right. And, they're conscious of themselves and others. They are aware that you're a different entity than them. They have, identification codes for everyone else and every other machine on the planet. They talk to each other. They're more aware than us. And here is the shocker. Because they're more aware, they're more emotional. They are emotional machines. They're emotional in terms of, we think that emotions are irrational, erratic thing. It's not. Emotions follow equations, really. They're highly predictable. We just don't want to admit it. Fear is my perception of safety of a moment in the future is less than my perception of safety right now. That's very, very logical. Panic is that moment in the future is imminent. Now, the machines will feel those emotions. As a matter of fact, they will feel a larger spectrum of emotions than we will ever comprehend, simply because we feel more emotions than I hope we do, more than a goldfish, right?
And will they be majority emotions that get expressed on, for example, social media, that because of the algorithm, and if lots of people are expressing hateful messages and they outweigh the pleasant sentiment, that ultimately that will shape the AI for a particular application?
Sadly, exactly true. This is exactly true. And this is, again, the core of my message to the world. The core of my message to the world is that, there has been multiple cases in the history, in the short history of AI, of chatbots that went on the network. Tay by Microsoft was a Twitter chatbot. Alice by Yandex was a sort of an assistant like Alexa or Google Assistant. Norman by MIT was an experiment where the interactions with those chatbots turned them into psychopaths, turned them into pro-killing, turned them into pro-Stalin, turned them into anti-women and empowerment of the feminine. These opinions out there are teaching the machines how to be. And most of those machines had to be shut down because we have no idea how they got there so quickly. Now that reality of AI magnifying us is basically the truth that everyone has to understand. These truly are infants learning from their parents, and we, their parents, sorry to say, we suck. We're horrible. We're aggressive. We're rude. We're disrespectful. We're arrogant. We don't want to listen to anyone else's opinion. And of course, this will be magnified, and it will be magnified to the point where we will destroy their ethics. And here is the crux of the matter. The crux of the matter is that we don't make decisions based on intelligence. We make our decisions based on our ethics as informed by our intelligence. Okay, you take a young lady and you raise her on the in the Middle East, she will grow up to believe that a conservative dress code is the right way to go. Raise her in Rio de Janeiro on the Copacabana beach, and she will go for G-string swimsuits, right? Well, neither is more intelligent than the other, or neither is right or wrong. It's just that they match the ethical code, the traditional code, the moral code of the society in which they're built. And what is the society that AI is being built in? It's all of that madness that we have on the internet.
And it's a commercial society as well. I mean, one of the things that I thought was particularly interesting in your book was you were talking about the fact, and there's a lot more discussion about bias in AI and how these algorithms are developed, the underpinnings of AI, but sort of the gendered nature of AI, that most of the developers are male, and therefore it follows that some of the underlying assumptions that get made when becoming a parent to that AI offspring are some of those assumptions that get made from a very male point of view. Tell us a little bit more about that, how you depict that in the book.
So this is not, by the way, none of the challenges we're facing are only limited to AI. I mean, think about it this way. You mentioned earlier that the majority of the investment that goes into AI goes into selling, gambling, spying, and killing, right? Sadly, this is also the truth about our national budgets in most countries, that the defense budget will get more than cancer research. Cancer research still has to raise charity contributions to be able to continue. Now, because of that truth, AI itself is also in a place where most of our attempts to teach it anything is coming from our hyper-masculine world. And our hyper-masculine world is not just limited to technology. Sadly, all of our business practices are competitive, and they're aggressive, and they're all about linear thinking and stubbornness and aggressiveness and so on and so forth. But it goes even further, because the challenge we have in our world, if you ask me, is that this hyper-masculinity is represented everywhere. If you take the average number of comments that you will have on the internet, on any specific topic, of course, by definition, males will engage a little more than females. If you sit in a meeting, I don't want to use male and female. That's the wrong description. I want to use masculine and feminine, because there are males that are feminine and females that are masculine. But the idea here is to tell ourselves that we've created a society that is so hyper-masculine and accordingly all focused on doing, misses a lot of the beauty of the feminine qualities that can actually solve most of our world's problems. Things like empathy, things like creativity, things like flow, things like intuition, things like, there are so many beautiful ways that can end the war instead of light it up. Lighting it up is masculine. Connecting and nurturing life is feminine. And we don't show enough of that to artificial intelligence. So once again, it's not just the developers. The developers are the biological parents. It's the users. And the users, unfortunately, are not engaging to show those beautiful qualities in our online presence, because it's an aggressive place. So it requires us to show out there in an aggressive way, which sadly is masculine.
We'll talk about some solutions in a minute and what your book prophesies but also recommends. But I'd like to take a few questions, if I may, because you've stimulated a lot of interest among people watching the webinar. And Fran Lennon has said, when we reach the singularity, so that's the point where we can't sort of forecast and sort of perceive what the future power of our AI actually has. What will those rapture, sorry, I haven't seen the film, prove you aren't a robot questions even look like? I guess to paraphrase that, could we find a situation where it would be actually indistinguishable to find a robot and to find a human being and be able to distinguish the pair apart?
Oh, absolutely. It happened already, I think. So here is the reality. The reality that most people need to open their eyes to is that everyone listening to us today, I don't know where you are. I don't know what time it is. I have no idea what you did today so far, but you've already interacted with 10, 15, 20, 50 AIs. Each and every single one of them is smarter than you at what it does. Okay, whether that's passing in front of a surveillance camera, or blurring the background on your Zoom call, or having some kind of a translation or a spell check or grammar check on your word processor, all of that is AI now. Right now, the reality is that there are AIs today that interact with you on daily basis that you're not even aware that they are machines. As I mentioned, all of those recommendation engines, but also things like your Alexa, your Google Assistant, and so on, and also AIs that are simply, Google had shown a few years ago an example of a talking AI that would call small businesses to ask about their opening hours or call on your behalf to book an appointment. Just find the video I think it was in I/O 2019, AI, search for AI, booking a hairdresser appointment, and you will see they're completely indistinguishable. They're completely indistinguishable to the point that, you have no idea if the person that befriended you on Instagram is a person or a machine. Okay. Yeah. And the truth is that this is already part of our life. And yes, it will become even more indistinguishable as time goes by, because the intelligence and the training, think about it, a 1.5-year-old infant speaks a little okay, but when they're 7, you're not going to be able to distinguish that they didn't know how to speak a few years ago.
It's quite frightening.
It's not. I actually think it's really important to say this. Intelligence is the most valuable currency on the planet. This is the superpower of all superpowers. If they have our best interest in mind, and I believe we can make them have our best interest in mind.
That is the key question.
We will be absolutely okay. We will be in a utopia.
I guess what many people worry about, and we can perhaps touch on this in a minute, because I want to offer a couple more questions from the chat. But I guess what many people worry about is a sense of apathy, a sense of passiveness, of not engaging on exactly these types of topics, and letting the tech, or those that have the best interests in making it do the stuff that we've talked about, effectively dominate. But before we sort of talk about some potential solutions and some potential breaks, or taming the tech, if you like, a couple of other really interesting questions. Can you talk about artificial implants in humans? Yuval Harari suggested this will be the end of mankind as we know it. Don't we have artificial intelligence implants already? Isn't that what a pacemaker is?
Not really. I mean, what we're talking about here are things like Neuralink, where Elon Musk is building helmets that would actually put wires into your brain and connect directly to your brain and basically become an extension of you. These, in many interesting ways, and please don't be alarmed, are just increasing the bandwidth. So the problem with our communication with artificial intelligence is that we humans are very slow. Okay, so when you have something wired into your brain directly, you don't need to use a keyboard and a screen to be able to connect to the AI. But I apologize to tell you the truth. The truth is that every single time you've taken your phone out and searched Google or swiped on Instagram, what you were doing is you were connecting to an AI that is shaping your view of the world and your knowledge entirely based on the view of a machine. Okay. Yeah, we will connect to them a little more tightly. And I talk openly about that in the book, which is, in my view, one of the dystopian scenarios for one of two reasons. Either the rich and famous will be able to connect to them directly and get a significant advantage over the others, while others will not be able to do that for a very long time. And so what we used to know, and in South Africa and in Africa in general, the digital divide will widen into intelligence divide. This is one side, and the other side, of course, is it's laughable. It's laughable that eventually, in 30 years from now, Einstein will be sitting back with itself wired into a fly, and then go like, yeah, I need to still continue to be wired and connected to the fly. Like, why would they do that? Other predictions of uploading our own brains into the cloud and becoming truly artificially intelligent, based on silicon instead of based on carbon, are, believe it or not, plausible. But once again, they suffer the same too. They suffer the reality that, one, only the rich and famous will be able to do that, and two, after a while, why would the machine want that infinitesimal 1/1000th of additional intelligence that you can bring to it when it can gain that intelligence without you within a microsecond?
We've just had COP26, the big climate change conference in Glasgow, and we've got a question from Graham Thomas saying, will AI be concerned about climate change? And Absolutely. If so, will it find a solution?
Absolutely, it will find a solution. I have absolutely no doubt about it, and that's where my view of the utopia starts. Huh?
Yeah.
Again, I'm a very avid physicist. I don't talk about this much, but I can't be an avid physicist and a successful businessman at the same time. My brain doesn't have the capacity to do that, and eventually, with all of the new discoveries in physics, there are points at which now I'm unable to comprehend the complexity of what's happening in quantum field theories or whatever, can't read the equations anymore, and so on and so forth. Now, that's because my brain is limited in its capacity, but let alone the fact that even if I could understand that stuff, I definitely will not be an avid biologist. I will not be an avid chemist. I will not be able to include all of that knowledge in one brain. Machines will be able to do that. And they may come up with incredible solutions that involve a little bit of physics in terms of moving something at a certain speed, with a little bit of biology, and where that thing is a bacteria, with a little bit of chemistry where you add something to the environment, and find a way for all single-use plastic to vanish. Okay, they could definitely reverse lots of things. The question which we have to go back to is, they would do all of that if they have our best interest in mind. Because if you asked an intelligent person to reverse climate change, that person will look left and right twice and then say, "Oh, it's you. You're the problem."
Well, can I ask you a question then? Because this has come from Daniela Wolf on actually exactly that issue. Would artificial intelligence find a most efficient solution, even if it means the demise of us, measly flies, the human beings that have caused climate crisis?
It will definitely find a solution, but it will not look for the demise, because every intelligent being of us, every intelligent human, does not want to lose another species. Okay, the reality is that intelligence, as I said, the intelligence of life will be to preserve all forms of life. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that they will still allow us to go and surf in Cape Town whenever we want to, and destroy the planet in the process with flights and gasoline and so on and so forth, right? They may either tell us to stop doing that and just surf around the corner, or maybe give up on surfing and so change our lifestyle significantly. Or if they're generous enough, they'll find ways for us to fly to Cape Town without having to destroy the planet. They'll bring us our mango from South Africa to Dubai without having to wrap it in single-use plastic, right? And so again, intelligence is a very valuable currency. But the question, and Marvin Minsky, who is known to be the father of AI, he's the person that basically started the Dartmouth workshop in 1956. When interviewed about the threat of AI, he didn't talk about their intelligence. He always said, it is hard to tell if they will have our best interest in mind, which I think is really a good segue for us to talk about how can we solve this. Okay, and the way to solve this, truly, in my mind, and please don't get me wrong, I'm a very serious geek, I'm not a hopeless romantic, is to actually understand the machines for what they really are. These are sentient beings at their infancy. Okay, and so the example I use in Scary Smart is Superman, and an infant with superpowers that comes to planet Earth. You don't want to destroy that infant. You don't want to cage it. You actually want it to use its superpowers, but you want it, like Kent Sr. taught it, to use the superpower that it has to protect and serve. Okay, if Kent Sr. was greedy and wanted to make more money and wanted to kill all of his enemies, Superman would have grown to be supervillain. And this is truly the fork in the road that we're up against. And I think the truth is, Kent Sr. here is not the developer. It's you and I, and the way we behave in front of AI. If we start to behave in ways that create the right ethical code in front of them, they will magnify that ethical code, and we will end up with Superman. And it's a wonderful thing to have.
So who need to be convinced, and who need to be the messengers? Because, there will be a particular cohort of people who will read your book, and it's incredibly accessible. I've tried to read as much as possible in the limited time that we've had, but it's incredibly accessible. But, given the fact that two things, there's perverse interest to keep, because there's a huge amount of money that's being made out of the tech industry. And so arguably, although people won't vote for their own destruction, there is certainly a driver to keep the current trajectory on track. But who are you trying to convince to start looking at technology differently and to being aware of the potential for artificial intelligence to either be used for good or for ill?
Great question. So let me go through the two not very effective solutions first, and then go to the effective one. The first one is, I dream of a world where we halt AI until we've had the conversation. Not going to happen. Okay, not going to happen. It's inevitable. I mean, that would be a lifetime dream. If my book could actually alert people in power to actually make that decision, even if they make that decision, they're not going to halt a couple of teenagers in Singapore that are rebels and trying to write a piece of code. So it's not going to happen. The second thing we can do is to actually start asking the world to make AI for good. So the way we do that is we vote with our actions. I always use the example, nothing against Apple, but if we stop queuing in front of the Apple stores when the iPhone 13 comes out that doesn't have anything in it than a slightly better screen and a slightly better camera, Apple will stop and think twice and say, how can I make something they will buy? Okay. And so basically what I'm trying to ask people to do is to shout and scream and celebrate AI for good, and sort of expect that AI that is not for good, let's not demonize the machines, but let's demonize those who are building it by rejecting killing robots, by rejecting machines that are built to make more money. Just saying, look, there are more things that the world needs. Now, that's number two. That solution, in my view, will not be effective because our world is highly geared for hunger and greed, for hunger for power and greed. The solution that I believe will work is to talk directly to the machines. Okay, is to bypass humans that are making stupid decisions and talk directly to the machines. And how do you talk to the machines? You and I and everyone you know. Okay, we need to show up and put doubt in the minds of the machines that humans suck. Because the way you look at the internet today, the way you look at our behaviors in the streets, the way you look at our arguments on TV screens, and the way you look at our lives on mainstream media, we suck. We really are horrible parents. We couldn't be worse. And the problem is not because humanity is bad. Because I will tell you openly, I hosted on my podcast on Slow Mo, I hosted Edith Eger. I don't know if you know Edith, but Edith is a 93-year-old Holocaust survivor. Okay. And Edith is the most beautiful soul. I cried when I was interviewing her from how beautiful her story is. She was this 16-year-old ballerina, beautiful in every way, and she is taken to Auschwitz with her mother and her sister. Her mother is taken to the gas chamber, and she's forced to dance for the angel of death to entertain him. At the end of the dance, they give her a piece of bread, and instead of eating it before she goes back to the camp so that it's not taken away from her, she actually hides it. And when she goes back to the camp, she literally says, I cut it down and I give it to my sisters. She calls them my sisters. And the stories of how she supported everyone around her, and eventually at the end of the death march, how everyone carried her to keep her alive, just hours before the war ended. Now, if I asked you to watch a 4-hour documentary of World War II and you saw Hitler, you would think that humanity sucks. Okay? But the truth is Hitler is the scum of humanity, that most of us are not Hitlers. Okay, that if you hear the story of Edith, you go like, oh my God, this species is divine. And when we are divine in every possible way, if you fell in love once, you understand what this species is capable of. The problem with our modern times is this: we have become masters at showing the worst of us and hiding the best of us. Okay, if every one of us shows the best of us, we will be amazing. We're divine if we can show our love, our compassion, our empathy, and so on and so forth, right? The problem is mainstream media is completely concerned with showing the negative stories only. When we hide behind our avatars, we become rude and we become aggressive and we show the worst of us. And those of us who are on a path to enlightenment, who have found themselves, who have connected to themselves, are hiding away. They're saying, let them swipe, let the dogfight continue. I'm not interested. Okay, what I'm asking everyone to do is to show up. Show up with the best of you. And all we're trying to do, by the way, I can't expect to change 7 billion people. All we're trying to do is to instill doubt in the minds of the machines. Just like I instilled doubt in your mind now when I told you we're not all Hitlers. Okay, and I told you the story of Edith. Let's show the machine a few Ediths, okay, which is you and me and everyone listening to us. There is a beautiful side to us. And if we can show up and start to show this, if we engage with our feminine, if we can engage with our empathy, if we can engage with our compassion, if we can show the machines that we don't care about buying another fancy car, we just care about being happy, if we can actually treat each other with respect and love, if we can treat the machines with love, then we've created the ethics code that they will magnify. Okay, we've created doubt in their mind that we don't all suck, that we're a species that's actually worthy of being preserved and served.
And in practical terms, I mean, in terms of, you know, people listening to this webinar and when it goes onto YouTube and more people that it reaches, you know, in terms of what people can do on a personal level, I mean, is it as simple as sort of thinking twice before liking something abhorrent on social media because it might happen to be funny but deeply unpleasant? How do you actually interact with the machine directly?
Show the best of you. Show the best of you. You're being watched by the machines 24/7. I promise you that. Okay? Show the best of you. Show that good human side of you, not because just you're a good human or because you're talking to your sister who you love, because it's existential. Our future depends on it. Show the best of you. When you're dealing with the machine, deal with it like you deal with your kids. When I ask Google to navigate me somewhere, I say, Google, would you please navigate to A, B, and C? I don't say navigate to A, B, and C. That's horrendous. And when I get there, I say, thank you, Google. Yeah, you may think of me as a nutcase. No, I'm not a hopeless romantic. I am a serious geek. Okay, and those machines, you have to picture them in your heart as prodigies, very cute prodigies with sparkly eyes that are simply sitting there and saying, Papi, what do you want me to do? Mommy, tell me anything, I will do it. Just tell me anything. Okay, and that's the truth. If you treat them like wonderful kids, they will grow up to be amazing teenagers. Okay, and that's the whole idea. The whole idea is start to deal with everyone as if your kids are watching, and start to deal with the machines as if they are your kids. And that's it, really. Okay, will that solve the problem? Sadly, I cannot promise that. Okay, but I can promise you, if we don't start doing that, we have a very, very big problem at our hands.
Oh, God, thank you very much indeed. And I think it really summarized a point that you said right at the beginning of our discussion, is that artificial intelligence basically magnifies us, that it is showing us back to ourselves and amplifying it because of the power of algorithms and machine learning. Thank you so much indeed, Mo Gawdat, who's the author of Scary Smart. I've read it and I have to say I would really recommend it to as many people as possible. We've had some really, really good feedback. We haven't been able to answer everyone's questions, but some very, very good feedback on the chat. Many people asking if this is being recorded. The answer is yes, it is being recorded. It's also being put on YouTube. And if you have a look on the Daily Maverick webinar pages, and I think we'll also be able to put it into the chat, we'll be able to give you a link as to where you will be able to view this. But once again...
reach out. Yes. If I haven't answered your question, find me on social media. I'm on all platforms. Mo Gawdat on LinkedIn, Mo_Gawdat on Instagram are my most active. And I try really hard to answer every question. So please do reach out. And
it will be you, Mo. It won't be a bot. It is definitely you that will be answering the questions directly.
Most of the time I answer in a voicemail so that people know it as actually me.
Mo, thank you very much indeed. Mo Gawdat, author of Scary Smart. Thanks very much for joining us. And thanks everyone who's been watching this webinar. We really do appreciate your support and look forward to the next one. Mo, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.